I don't know if you guys saw this video that's been circulating, but reports indicate that North Korean troops, while it has been public knowledge for a while now, that North Korean troops are supporting the Russians. I was of the belief, though, that it was largely, and all the evidence up to this point seems to suggest that, defensive operations, where the North Koreans are performing tasks and roles, for example, holding a trench line in Kursk or in the Kursk region, freeing up Russian soldiers to go on their own attacks. Basically, to prevent North Korean soldiers from being captured, and in order to preserve this manpower and not to, have some humiliating thing where the North Koreans end up not really knowing what they're doing and getting slaughtered, because this is 21st century warfare, and it is a little different since the Korean War, that they were keeping them in these defensive positions and servicing in other roles to free up Russian personnel to go on assaults. Now we're getting reports that allegedly show North Korean units, which other sources are saying are dressed as Russian soldiers. So they're putting on Russian uniforms, they're dressing up like Russian soldiers, and are now going on assaults. Now, the footage that I see is baffling to me. And the reason it's baffling is that I've ran quite a lot along the front line now. And earlier, I think maybe 7 or 8 hours ago, I was running from house to house in a group of 3 people, and we would be separated by, 20 feet. And the reason to be separated that way is so that we couldn't clump up. And so if a drone strikes, it only takes out one of us, not 3 of us. Or, it's harder for them to, if we strike all together, we all group all together, it also makes a juicier target. And so the way you assault is you have to spread out over a wide area in order to make it, let's say, less appealing to strike you. And if you are struck, you got you're the 33% chance it's you. And the more people there is, the less of a chance it's going to be you. And you have to be quick. You want to stay out of the open. And then I saw this video, which is reportedly the Russians going on the assault. The North Koreans going on the assault. And look, I felt pretty nervous today because I was wearing a black helmet and a gray jacket, and it was snowy in the general Pokrovsk area, and I was in southern Pokrovsk operating with drone teams, filming them and such. But I was also running along not only icy areas with snow, I was also running along some blacktop. But I was nervous when I was on the snow because I knew from above, black helmet, gray jacket, green pants, I stick out like a thumb. And so I did my best to try to stay in the areas that weren't covered in the snow, like on the road and stuff like that. Even if the road is, or certain alleyways were not necessarily the safest, I didn't want to stick out. In this video, what you're looking at is a bunch of North Korean soldiers that look like black dots in the snow. If they were dressed in white, it would honestly be hard to see them. If they were dressed properly camouflaged, it would be very difficult to see these guys. If they were just, wearing, either painted the uniforms white, got winter gear. Mind you, it's not like the North Korean government did not know when they were sending over these soldiers that winter was coming and soon the conditions are going to change. Winter in Eastern Europe, particularly Ukraine and Russia, is kind of notorious. It's a very biting cold. It's honestly awful. While I'm very excited to go home for holidays and Christmas, I feel both guilty for leaving people in this cold, but also I'm very happy to get out of it because it is really not pleasant. But it should be known that, it snows. It's winter. And they just look like a bunch of black dots. And they look like they're charging in single file line, one after the other. Which, look, I think for obvious reasons, you can see some of them are pretty bunched up close together, which is not good when you're seeing the size of these shells that are exploding. If it hit in the middle there, it could take out 3, 4, maybe 5 guys at once. But going one after the other drags out the time the assault goes on. You got to think about it like this. If you're going out in a straight line one after the other towards the enemy position or towards the trench you need to reach, it's going to drag it out. It's going to drag it out because it's going to be longer for you guys to get there. It's one thing if you're, you know, you're in the back roads and you're just quickly trying to move from building to building. It's another thing if you're, you know, far away from the front and you were to do it, or you were not too close to the front and you were to do it. It wouldn't be that bad. If it's a small group of like 3 to 4 people, it's not the worst. But when you're going on a massive assault like this, you guys should be spread out in a bunch of different ways. It should be wide. They should have some guys down here to the south, some guys up there to the north, spread out over a wide area so that one lucky shot doesn't take out half the fucking assault. You want them spread out over a wide area and presumably dressed in something outside of what looks like dark uniforms on this white tie. I mean, you couldn't make a more visible soldier. I almost, it makes me reflect upon at the start of World War II, the French uniforms dressed in blue, this bright blue that just stuck out against the soil and stuck out against the ground as they were marching and file lines, getting mowed down by German machine guns because they're the most visible thing in the world. This is what it gives me remnants. It's an army getting introduced to a war that they have no familiarity with, that they have very poor communication skills with the soldiers around them to learn and just pick up stuff through osmosis. The reports indicate there's like three translators per 33 North Korean soldiers that are deployed out here. And this is the result. Now, mind you, this isn't useless. If this is, you know, if this is soldiers going to occupy rear positions, it's still bad enough. But this, engaging in an assault like this, or if they were to actually throw these guys into the fray and engaging in assaults and attacks, and they were to use these skills, I mean, they'd get decimated, man. They'd get decimated. Zerg rush. That's the only way I could compare it to. And look, I know that people talk about like meat wave assaults, but I mean, this just doesn't have any sense to it whatsoever. And look, here is a video that presumably shows them reinforcing rear line positions, marching in like single file line. Look how close they are. Those 3 guys over there. Look how close. They're like right next to each other. They're like right next to each other. They don't know what they're doing. You spread out, man. This is one of the first things you're taught. I think I was taught this like within the first year of me being here. This is something that was kind of hammered into me. And sometimes I'll notice other people are, you know, bunch up a little bit and I'll back up more because I'm not comfortable. Look, I just want to throw out there that these are people going into a war they have no familiarity with. They have never before in their lives had to fight a war like this. The last war the North Koreans fought was in the 50s. It's been something like 70 years. And now they're back in not only any war, but the largest war in Europe since World War II. And they're marching in chain formation, as if it's like a military parade.
Immoral, morally corrupt, bankrupt man.
Thank you so much for the sub. I appreciate that, Eretic. Thank you. Tier 1 for 9 months. We are back to Zap bringing tactics. Sorry, 1 second. This is a reference I don't understand. Also, I've been told that I have very little time before we have to head back out to film some more. Oh yes, this is a Futurama reference. Zap bringing in. Yeah, no, I was not going to get that. Very sorry. I have not watched Futurama. I wanted to read before we wrapped up because I got to head out of here. I'm already dressed. I'm ready to go. So I just need to pick up my bag. But I wanted to read these statements from the head of the Ukrainian Center for Countering Disinformation and then some testimony from a Ukrainian soldier about the poor state of these sad North Koreans that are being used in this way. As of now, it is not worth exaggerating the situation with the North Koreans in the Kursk region. Yes, they were trained to enter combat as infantry in Russian units solely for the sake of numbers and were brought to the line on which the Russians are conducting assault operations. Now, there are many rumors about Koreans who never end, and they end, even very much, like everyone else. More accurate information about their possible participation in battles will come later. North Korean soldiers in Russian uniforms are taking part in assaults in Kursk. So this is where they claim that they're taking part in assaults. We don't know if that footage we just saw is them taking part in an assault, which I doubt. I mean, they're getting fired upon, so it could be, or if it's just them moving to reinforce a rear position. Either way, the way that they were marching across an open field with white snow and dark uniforms was not smart. The fact that I could see them from that far away is not good. The Russians are betting on numbers and are trying to use Koreans to carry out assault operations when the Koreans' task is to run under the blows of our forces and occupy certain areas. There are already losses amongst the North Korean soldiers. As for the qualitative abilities, they are infantrymen who are practicing with the Soviet weapons and running forward. Russian propaganda will extol them in order to use North Korean soldiers as a horror story for the Ukrainian military and civilians. You shouldn't underestimate the enemy, but he is dying and you shouldn't believe in horror stories. Unfortunately, you have to spend additional resources on this. However, Russia has drawn the North Koreans into the war in Europe. There is no doubt that sooner or later the North Koreans will flee to NATO territory if Europe does not make qualitative changes in the attitude to threats now and does not rely only on the USA or Ukraine. Now, I would break this down quicker, but I don't have much time, so I'm trying to read as much of this testimony as I can before I head out of here. Here is from a Ukrainian soldier in the Kursk direction about the Koreans. They went into battle more than a week ago, so since this topic has come up, I'll add a few words myself. This is a well-trained, motivated, and cold-blooded personnel who are proficient with all types of Soviet-era weaponry, care about the lives of their comrades, and are deeply demoralized by their losses. Koreans who have served together for 5, 10, or 15 years are dying before each other's eyes. What kind of motivation could they have? Probably just to avoid getting executed, just like our convicts. Captured Russian soldier. This is testimony from a Russian soldier they captured. Reportedly, according to them. Which, of course, Ukrainian sources, Ukrainian perspective, keep that in mind. The Russians, for their part, fail to group their actual combat potential and send them to die alongside their own cannon fodder. They weren't prepared for drones and never will be. Made of flesh and bone, they die just like our brothers. To all this, you can add their absolutely horrible coordination, which only worsens their situation. As you can see, not exactly the most organized redeployments. Russian propaganda is entirely focused on glorifying their ally, attributing victories to them that cost hundreds of Russian lives, but it's clear why. In the future, they will help them secure more free cannon fodder for the front. Look, we've kind of accepted this very quickly, the idea of an Asian army invading Europe during the largest war in Europe since World War II. But this is a massive shift, and if it is successful, then this is an action that could be repeated for more benefits for the North Korean regime, which is desperately trying to get technology inflows, monetary inflows to prop up Kim's government. And so while we're seeing a lot of the errors that come with this, a lot of the lack of knowledge, the fact that they're not used to this, they might have 15 years of training for a war on the Korean Peninsula, but fighting a war on the Korean Peninsula is different than taking coal mounds in Donbass. And so they're facing the hard reality of that. But I mean, even over in Korea, charging across open fields like this is only something someone would do if given bad orders by bad commanders or with no other option. And even if you have no other option, the way they're conducting those moves are not smart. They're not smart at all. And so it makes you question, how much can the Russians really put to use these soldiers if they just use them as either in a Zerg rush tactic of charging the enemy, or don't properly use them and dispose of them quite quickly, like they have their own convicts and many of their own soldiers. The Catboy simping for the Syrian lion, how quaint. You know, I never thought about it that way. Now that you mention it.